I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. Welcome to our Tuesday weekly webinar. A lot has happened since we last convened 2 weeks ago. SED and Governor Cuomo both released details about their guidelines for schools to plan to reopen in the fall. There's a lot of information in the guidelines. Today's webinar, we will summarize the information currently available, hear additional direction and suggestions from authorizers, and field questions. To provide more time to cover this important topic, we will also hold a webinar on reopening this Thursday. So the Race, Justice, Equity Series webinar, originally scheduled for Thursday, July 16th, will be rescheduled to August. Please look for that update on the rescheduled event. But even with 2 webinars, there will likely be many more questions for which answers will not be available. As always, we appreciate your patience and understanding while we, authorizers, and other charter organizations will both work to both determine what to push for and also make sure that you have what you need to run great schools. Before I turn it over to authorizers today, I want to share with you some information on what we know. Yesterday, SED released an overview of its guidelines. The full guidelines will be released tomorrow. In the chat is a link to the presentation that the task force used to present a framework of their guidelines to the regions. Also yesterday, Governor Cuomo laid out his requirements to reopen schools. Schools will be reopened for in-person instruction on a regional basis if the region meets the requirements for reopening. The requirements for reopening are: the region must be in phase 4, and the infection rate for the region must stay under 5% for a 14-day average. If the region meets those requirements, the school will reopen. This determination on whether or not a region meets the requirements will be made by the state the first week of August. So that's August 1st through the 7th. We're dropping a link in the chat to the state tracker that tracks the regional infection rates. So based on that criteria, if the decision were made today about the regions, all regions in the state would be eligible for schools to reopen except New York City, which is not yet in phase 4 of reopening. If the regional infection rate spikes after August 1st, schools will be closed if that rate is above 9% for a 7-day average. The governor outlined that these standards determine if schools in each region can reopen, but standards for how to reopen will be set by SED and New York State DOH guidance. New York State DOH guidelines are available at the link that we're dropping into the chat as well. As I said previously, SED guidance will be released tomorrow. This Friday, a portal will be available on the SED website for charter schools and districts to submit their plans, which are due by the end of the month. There's also a link available for the New York State DOH for schools to sign and submit their forms, their reopening plans. Once schools are open in the fall, the trigger for a school to close due to school-based infections will be based on the conditions identified in your reopening plans, the plans that the school submitted to the state. Schools need to identify those conditions and consult in consultation with state and local health departments. Many of you also heard that Mayor de Blasio released a plan for New York City schools to reopen. If that plan meets the SED guidelines and New York City enters phase 4 and stays below a 5% infection rate, the plan can be implemented. New York City charters will still be able to and be required to make their own reopening plans and submit them separately. That said, and then Angeli and Laurie will speak to any considerations for DOE authorized and co-located charter schools. That was a lot. There's a lot of information, and that's exactly why we will have 2 webinars. So today I am joined by, as I have been in the past, Susie Carello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, David Frank, Executive Director of the Charter Schools Office at New York State Education Department, Angeli Matos, Executive Director, Policy and Operations at New York City DOE, Laurie Hazeley, Senior Director, Charter Authorizing Office at New York City DOE, Aaron Cochran, Managing Director in the same office, and Randall Eiserman and Corey Callahan from the New York City Charter Center. Welcome, everyone. Before we get to you, I do have a couple of non-opening related notes that I'd like to just let everyone know about. First, At our last webinar, a question was asked about open meetings law. To close the loop on that, the current flexibility on open meetings has been extended until August 5th. Second, the Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer, or PEBT program, state helpline phone number and resources are available online. Families with students in New York City schools who have started to receive their benefits, and for some families, the benefits will arrive this month or next. There's more information on the program available from OTDA, the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance. We will drop the link in the chat, and you can check that out for more information. Finally, I am happy to announce that we have partnered with an organization to secure deep discounts on items schools are ordering to prepare for the school year, including PPE, cleaning supplies, and other items such as thermometers. You should have received an email with instructions for ordering and for accessing additional discount if you are a New York Charter School Association member. If you do not receive an email, please contact membership@nycharters.net, and we will help you. Now, welcome all, and we'll start with David, Susie, and Laurie. Welcome. Would you like to kick it off with an update? And Susie, we'll start with you.
I was muted. You never start with me. A heads up. Hi, everyone. Good to see you.
I try to mix every now and then.
Yeah. Good to see everyone, or not see you, but see your names. It's been quite some time. So the State University of New York, in compliance with the plans that the governor put out yesterday, is preparing some guidance for State University of New York authorized charter schools to submit their reopening plans to us. And again, we'll have the link and direction for the DOH portal as well. And we're hoping to release that tomorrow. It references some of the guidance that has already been provided by the State Education Department, and so that you know, has the components, the required components that the governor posted within the DOH plan. And that includes the restart operations, the monitoring, and I'm trying to think, the fourth one is closure. I think I'm forgetting the third one that's in there. But we are working on getting that out to you quickly. We also know and have had the great benefit from a number of you sharing with us over the last month your plans that you've been using, or at least designing preliminarily for your school community. And we will be asking for you to also provide any plans like that if you have them, not that you have to go out and create them, and asking if you've already determined on a number of areas, kind of protocols for in and out, protocols for cleaning, other pieces that you'll be able to attach that plan and reference specifically where you have laid that out for your school community. As with the other requests, we're going to ask that the schools place those plans, not only submit them to us and through the DOH portal, but also place those plans on their websites so that families, community members, staff, students will all have access to those plans. And I think the last piece of it is, while we know the due date is July 31st, and Mika, thank you for giving all of the metrics for return to school, et cetera. We know that even within all of the very careful thinking, it may be that additional information develops as fall approaches and commences, and that there may be some modifications or changes to what your initial plans were, and we're working in that flexibility.
Great, thank you. I will note, too, that the New York State Department of Health guidelines are actually titled interim. So thank you for that, making that clarification, Susie. Laurie, we'll go to you next, and David will finish with your update.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Similar to what Susie shared, we are also working on guidance for your plans. In terms of our review, we understand they will be submitted through the SED portal, and we'll be working with our colleagues at SED to review your plans once they have been submitted to SED and DOH. We are, of course, still working with our internal partners to discuss approval, and we will be following up with schools as we have questions. Similar to what Susie shared, if you have questions as you are putting together your plans, please do feel free to reach out, and we will be collecting questions and responding to them as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you. David, you can jump right in.
Thanks, Yumika. It's good to be back. I feel like I feel withdrawals from not having our webinar last week, but it is good to be here. So we know that there seems to be a lot of duplication, lots of guidance out there, lots of plans, but we are trying to make it as streamlined as possible. And just to be clear, SED's portal is not asking for a narrative description, although we are going to ask for a link to your plan, but rather we're asking for schools to attest that they're complying with the requirements of both the DOH plan as well as the DOH guidance as well as SED's guidance. And so we will send that guidance out to all charter schools, and we'll also send the link out to all charter schools as well. As Susie was saying, we do expect that these plans will change, and that's why we're asking for a link to your plan so that you can go and update your plan as needed, but that you can have it accessible on your website, and just keep that link the same so that we can go in and look and make sure that that we're able to provide support and monitoring. We also, the state ed department is not approving plans, but rather, unless you hear from us, you can consider them to be approved, and you won't be able to submit your plan or your link or complete the form unless you make the attestations that are mandated, again, by both the DOH and SED. So we're trying to make this as easy and painless as possible. A lot of work has gone into the guidance, and kindly, as Yumika and Anna shared, we did have a presentation to the Board of Regents on Monday, yesterday, regarding the guidance that's coming out tomorrow. And just, I never know how long-winded or short to be in these sort of things, but just to go over some of the highlights. Our guidance was informed by the virtual regional education and student forums that we had. And again, thank you to all the charter school representatives. We worked alongside with multiple SED program offices, as well as the Department of Health, Department of Buildings, to create the guidance. The document is intended to provide you with supports and a framework that you can use to create a plan, whether or not you're going to be providing instruction in person, remotely, or some combination of the two, a hybrid plan. And although, as the governor stated, there are now metrics for school reopening, for now, at least, reopening in person is still a local decision, a decision based on the LEA. And as charter schools, all of you are LEAs. There, of course, is no one-size-fits-all model, and we expect that even within the same districts, many schools will have different plans, but you need to do what's best for your community within the guidelines. Some of the things that we're going to be requiring, and I mentioned this on other webinars, but we're looking for health and safety information to make sure that you're doing health checks, that you're developing plans to maximize social distancing whenever possible, you're managing students or staff that might become ill during the school day, that you're instructing teachers and staff and students on proper hand hygiene procedures. Students and staff are required to wear face coverings pursuant to the DOH guidance, and that you do have procedures for disinfecting and cleaning buildings. If you're your own school food authority, we do expect that all schools that are their own school food authority continue to provide meals each day, whether you're in person or remote, but that if you're part of an SFA, so particularly schools in New York City, that's continues to be the district responsibility, but that everyone will continue in compliance with child nutrition program requirements. That you'll have a component of social emotional well-being in your plans. That you'll have a plan for welcoming students back, many of whom have experienced significant trauma because of health reasons, but also because of economic reasons, that parents and families might maybe who weren't economically disadvantaged now are, or are facing increased pressures. And so you'll have a component of that in your plan. Regarding your facilities, there's increased flexibility regarding your footprint, regarding the way that you utilize space, and you should ensure and endeavor to think creatively. But of course, that if you are significantly changing the utilization of those spaces, that you do either receive updated fire or building code approvals. Those approvals are not waived. The health and safety of students remains first and foremost. And by the way, as I've received a lot of questions about fire and fire drills, those still must be conducted, ensuring that there's social distancing taking place. But again, even if you're have a socially distanced in-person convening, fires still can happen. So we want to make sure that students know what to do. Transportation is a hot button topic. I think I've received more questions about transportation than anything else. Each school district is developing a transportation plan. And when you develop your plans, you might not know what the district's plans are, but that's why the plans are flexible. And we encourage you to look at the district plan once it's posted. And yes, districts are required, just like charter schools, are required to post those plans publicly. And so you can take a look at what the district's doing and plan accordingly. Of course, some people might not know this, but the district is actually not obligated to provide you transportation. They're only obligated to provide you transportation if they do for non-public schools. And so if districts are not convening in person and they're providing transportation to nobody, they're not obligated to provide the charter school transportation. There's a murky area around students with disabilities, and SED will be releasing further guidance, or I defer to people like my friend Paul O'Neill, who lives and breathes this sort of thing. Regarding attendance, charter schools should continue to follow guidance around attendance, but you're responsible for collecting and reporting daily attendance. And the only wrong thing to do is not collect attendance in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of other requirements, and you can go through the materials that will be released tomorrow, or the PowerPoint that Anna posted earlier. But we do expect that the portal will open on Friday, July 17th. And the submission deadline is the 31st. So please reach out if you have any questions. If you do have any questions about the DOH guidance, you should of course reach out to the DOH, not to SED. But that's the opening guidance in a nutshell. And in the danger of being long-winded, I just have one more update around regulatory flexibility. And so
Go
yes,
on, David.
Sorry.
You're fine. Keep
Okay,
going.
good.
You're
Thank
fine.
you, Yamika.
Who doesn't love regulatory flexibility,
Well,
David?
it's very important. You know, I love a good regulation or two. That's why I work at the state ed department. But the regents did provide additional regulatory flexibility to schools in addition to the existing regulatory flexibility that was already provided. And I won't go into that because we've covered that in the past, but the unit of study definition for our high schools was amended that the 180 minutes instructional time per week that exists. So the hours that you need to meet, the 990 for high schools now can incorporate alternative instructional experiences for students. So this might mean work that they're doing remotely in small group instruction. It might mean other supports. It might mean projects they're working on. So there's additional flexibilities around unit of study. There's additional flexibilities around CDOS. I know many of our high schools offer the CDOS credential. And now there's actually some flexibility around the 54 hours of documented work-based learning experiences. There's now for science courses for your high school students, that the lab minutes, it's 1,200 lab minutes are required. That can now be met through simulated laboratory experiences. I know that sometimes you can't do the simulated lab experiences, but that can be a large component of that. For our charter schools in New York City that have pre-K, there's flexibilities around staffing ratio for your little 4-year-olds, and so you can look at those flexibilities on the Regent's website, and there's flexibilities around substitute teaching, and so now you can actually have a substitute teacher in your school beyond the 40-day limit, and it can be up to now 90 days in extreme circumstances, and more than 90 days in rare circumstances. So there's a lot of details there on the Regent's website, and I can provide a link to it later on. We also amended some charter school regulations, and so we enshrined the ESSA fiscal transparency requirements, as well as brought our data reporting regulations into the 21st century. So we were glad to do that. And very last thing, we're actually working with the Office of General Services, and we're looking to save your schools money on buying PPE. And so this might be everything from bleach to gloves to masks to you name it. I'm actually, later today, I'm going to send you a memo asking you to fill out a very short survey, just asking you to estimate how much PPE you'll need, and that way we can convey that to OGS. This is not PPE that the state is going to give you. Rather, this is PPE that you can buy from OGS, the Office of General Services at the state, at the bulk rate. So you're using the bulk purchasing power of the great state of New York. And so more information to come. This might not cover all of the things that you can get through the state association's initiative, but it'll list out the things that you can get. Think industrial supply rather than some of the smaller items that you might buy. But more information to come. And as always, I know that's a lot of information, but I'm happy to take any questions, and I will hand it back over to you, Yumika.
All right, great. I just want to highlight two things and just ask you to repeat. The schools can reopen. Schools reopen. The governor has a formula, criteria, 5% over 14 days. But then that's the overall regional requirement, and then the schools, the LEAs determine their own opening thing. Can you just say a little bit more about that so that folks are clear about that?
Yeah. So again, this is subject to change, of course, but as of right now, using the governor's flexibilities, if your region meets the criteria, you are able to reopen for in-person instruction. However, that is a local decision that you can make. You might say what's best for my school is we're going to do remote instruction only. As of today, you can do that. We've also heard that many schools will do a combination. So they will do some in-person instruction and some remote instruction. As long as your region meets the governor's criteria, then as of today, you can make that decision for you. That ensures that you're making the right decision for your community and that we're leaving the educational decisions in the hands of educators. However, to echo the governor's comments, that might change. It could change because there's there's a second wave of the pandemic here in New York, as we've seen in other states, or that might change because things are going really well. I would just pay attention to announcements from the governor, but as of right now, you can plan for either in-person instruction, you can plan for remote instruction, or you can plan for a combination of the two.
All right, great, thank you. Before I move on to my next question, I just want to ask Susie and Laurie.
And I would just say, you can plan for those things if your region meets the governor's criteria. I just want to re-emphasize that.
Yeah. All right. Susie, Laurie, did you want to add anything before I move on to the next question?
I would just say if the region isn't open, but you have plans for full remote instruction on the school day, that would, under our analysis of what the governor has put out, allow you to go ahead and have instruction even if you didn't have your bricks and mortar location open. Just wanted to underscore that.
Yeah, I would agree.
Did we lose you, Mika?
Sorry. So I just see that the statement on the busing was a blockbuster. So can you just unpack that a little bit more, David? I think that got a lot of folks' attention on this call.
Sure. Well, pursuant to the education law, districts need to provide charter schools. I have to be careful. I know there are a lot of lawyers on this call. So pursuant to the education law, districts need to provide charter schools with busing to the same extent as non-public schools. Therefore, if a district does not provide busing to non-public schools, they are under no obligation to provide busing to charter schools. Therefore, if you're in a district that is, for example, 100% remote instruction, and your school, you decide we're going to be 100% in-person instruction, and you reach out to the district and you say, okay, district, we're going to be remote, we're going to be in person, provide us busing. The district could go back to you and say, charter school, sorry, we're not going to provide you with busing because we're not providing busing to anyone because we're not in person. And so they can do that under the education law. What they can't do is so let's say you're in a city and you see, the district is remote instruction and you're in person and your Catholic schools are in person, and you see that the district is providing busing to the Catholic schools, but they tell you, charter school, we're not providing you busing. Well, that's not allowed. It needs to be uniform. What they do for the non-public schools is what they need to do for the charter schools. But charter schools should be aware of that. And that's actually not a COVID-19 issue. That's been in the charter law since 1998. So just keep that in mind. However, as always, I would encourage you to have a conversation with the district. A lot of the districts are under severe financial strain, and it might be a matter of cost for them. You might be able to have some type of compromise to cover some of those costs. They are getting some funding from the state to cover those costs. Sometimes that funding, the match the state gives them is substantial. In some places across the state, it could be as much as 90% plus. But we're going to have a further in-depth conversation with this on the state association's call on Thursday. So if that's not a good plug to join the state association's call on Thursday, I don't know what is.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question I have is if each of you could comment on what you see as the approval process for these plans. What do they look like? Could two charter schools, for example, as theoretical neighbors, each propose a different format, all in person, all remote, or all hybrid? And for Susie and Laurie, right now the expectation is that all schools submit these plans to and through SED, what role do you play? What role do you play or plan to play with schools authorized by SUNY and/or New York City DOE?
So the governor's guidelines indicate if you're a SUNY authorized charter school that you need to submit your plans to us, which is why we're putting out guidance. And as I'll just repeat what I said a little earlier, the preponderance of what we are asking for come from the guidance the governor and the Department of Health put out yesterday that include the required elements of a plan. And there is a link or a portal. I'm not sure which because I haven't tried to submit something in it yet. That the DOH has for you to submit the plans there. We're going to give the directions about how to submit your plans to us, and also require that you put them on your website. And I'm happy, David, SUNY will take all of our school's plans and aggregate them together so your team can pop them out of the cloud or something if that's helpful, and certainly saves a step on the part of SUNY authorized charter schools from submitting their plans. Did that answer the question?
I would add we're not so unless you hear from us, you should consider, once you submit your plan, you should consider it to be approved. We are going to have those attestations in there, and you won't be able to submit the plan unless you attest to the various components, the mandated components that are required by SED and the DOH. And then you're not creating a separate narrative for us to submit. Rather, you're putting your plan up on your website by the deadline, and you're giving us a link to that plan. We hope that you'll work to update the plan as you get more information. You don't need to submit a new link to us as long as you keep the link the same. So we hope that you will keep a standard link that won't change, so that you'll just submit the link. Here's where you can find it, SED, and we can go from there. We are planning on sending our guidance as well as the link to the SED portal to all charter schools, and we're also sending it out to all other schools in the state of New York. So district schools, BOCES, non-public schools, so it's going out to everybody.
Okay, great. Laurie, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you. So similarly, we'll be looking to see that all of the required elements are in the plans. We're going to be looking to see that plans are aligned with the school's charter, and then we will be following up with schools if we have additional questions or think additional information is needed.
I would just want to add one other thing. In terms of best practice, I would strongly recommend that any school present their plans to their board of trustees for approval, and not just submit something that their staff has created. We want to make sure that all schools are engaged in good governance, and so that would be my recommendation to everyone.
I would agree with that.
Okay, another question. Considering the governor will be making a decision in the beginning of August, would you be open to a delayed start for those who begin in mid-August with students to give a workable amount of time between the final decision about opening and the actual first day of school?
Yumika, ask the question again. Would we be open to
a delayed start for the schools who begin in mid-August with students to give them a workable amount of time between the final decision about opening, right, so the August 7th, and then the actual first day of school. So could schools decide we're going to delay a little bit from normal, our normal first day, because we need a little bit more time between the time we were given the green light and when we want to open schools?
I'll take a stab at that and ask my colleagues to jump in. So definitely following the all clear to open. We're going to ask schools to submit what their best thinking is about a calendar, and how that might look, because many of you have, kind of come up with whether it's 4 days a week, 4.5 days a week with professional development, 2 days, 3 days a week, longer school day, all of the autonomies with your calendars that you have enjoyed, or structured for yourselves that have delivered pretty strongly for your kiddos. All of those there. We're going to ask for a school calendar. Again, this is one of those things that we think there may be some flexibility on, but what your best thinking is, how you will conduct school for the year, if in the eventuality that there is not another closure, which none of us can predict, and there is not some order that comes out of a situation where everything's going great and there's no more virus in New York. Not anticipating that. And we'll ask you to update that for us. So to return to Yumika's question, if there's an approval on August 7th, we don't expect schools to start on August 8th if that's not what their thinking is in their plan. And we understand there may need to be some flexibilities in the plan. David will be better at citing the regulatory relief on school calendar days that the regents have put in place than I can be. But again, within the bounds of that regulatory relief, whatever the school determines its best calendars are, that's fine with us. I also wanted to note, we are asking, just for our schools, if you're a multi-school ed corp, we are asking for you to submit one plan across all of your schools. And again, it may be that you have different schedules, given the different cohorting of students as your plans provide. So it may be that seniors start a week early or kindergartners start a week early. And again, we are looking for you to design what you think the best flexible plans are for you to do great things for kids again this year.
Great, thank you, Susie.
We would be open to schools changing their calendar. As always, it's a non-material revision, and we would just ask, what is the educational benefit to students, and have you engaged in communication with your community, parents, staff, etc., around that proposed change? We wouldn't want families to be caught unaware. And so if schools need to postpone, then we're open to that possibility. But there is significant flexibilities that schools continue to have around remote instruction. And so even though you might not, let's say you're planning to open on August 1st, but you need to wait for the governor's decision on August 7th, between August 1st and August 7th, you can run I was going to say a curse, but you can run a darn good remote instructional program, or to the best of your ability, until such time as you have further guidance. So we don't want, we want to make sure that perfect doesn't become the enemy of good here.
All right, great, thank you. So we're almost at 4:45. We're going to turn it over to the Q&A, and then we'll follow up with New York City DOE. I ask folks for patience here. We'll get to as much as we can get to. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I see a lot of questions still coming up in the chat. We need to be able to keep up and keep this going, and the Q&A is the best place for your questions. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Well, this has stretched my Q&A capacity more than ever. So I will echo the request for grace and patience from everyone. So before I dive into a couple of what I think are the biggest questions, I'm just going to say a couple of things. One is that we are going to capture all of these questions. We will not get to all 38 of them because I do also want to save some time for DOE specific questions, of which there are a couple. And we are going to capture all of the questions that we have not answered, and we will lead off with them on Thursday. And so just to reiterate what Yumika said earlier, which is that we are going to convene Same format, same length, same time, Thursday this week. We will lead off with any additional gleanings that we have from the SED plans being released, but then we will dive straight into questions because we will not be able to get to all of them today. And we didn't want to wait another week knowing that you guys don't have a ton of time to put these plans together and submit them before the 31st. So I think a major theme that I'm seeing that I would love all of the authorizers to speak to is this question about families. This is the hard thing. I'm going to say opting out, but I know opting out has baggage. So if a school elects to run full in-person, or a school elects to run hybrid, and a family elects to not send their student in person at all, what implications does that have? And how would you advise that schools navigate that?
So we would expect, as an authorizer, not as the state ed department, we would expect that schools would have a plan to ensure that they're meeting the needs of all students. I hope that we don't authorize any schools that wouldn't take into account the severe emotional trauma that the pandemic has caused families and students. And I personally wouldn't want to be affiliated with any school that would force families to make a choice between their health and going to school. And so I would hope that schools would take that into account and ensure that they're doing the best job they can, given the unfortunate situation that we're all in, to provide the best education to all students when possible. That might mean that you need to provide additional multi-tiered intervention supports to students who don't feel comfortable or can't attend the in-person portion of your school. Or you might need to talk to parents about the expectations that you have as a school and plan accordingly. The one thing I would strongly caution schools against is not including students in your educational program and then billing for those students. I think that that would be a big red flag for districts. And I don't think that we could rationalize that in any way, although you do have continued flexibility in that 180-day or the 990 hours of instruction requirement as it pertains to billing that will continue through continue at the start of this coming academic year.
So I'll just add on that part of the required plan that the governor talked about yesterday that we're including is information both about the kind of social emotional instruction or planning that the school is doing and provision of services to vulnerable populations. And so it may be that in one case, as David alluded to, there's a health reason that a child might not be able to attend the in-person portion. And there, again, I think we've talked about this for the last few months, and I know so many of the schools have polled their parents more than once or twice to get a feel for their school community. And it may be that you understand more than we do the percentage population of your families that are a little hesitant, and I can understand that, especially I think at the beginning of the school year. You know, if we get started and things are going well, I think that'll build some confidence amongst a number of your families. But to not offer them an online option, if that's a choice of the family, I think would be, again, not making the most of your commitment to the kids who choose your program.
Laurie, any other thoughts? Not to put you on the spot. Well, while Laurie is potentially composing an answer, the last sort of highest level question, and again, I apologize to the 39 additional questions that we're going to stick on ice so that we can have some DOE specific content fielded. But again, we will lead off with all of these questions on Thursday. I think the parallel question that has appeared a lot in conversations that we've had and in the Q&A today is that if a district is not fully remote, can a charter located in that district decide to be fully remote?
In the sake of brevity, the answer is yes.
That's also my interpretation, but I wanted folks at home to hear you say it. Susie, you agree?
Yep.
Great. All right. So with that, and recognizing that we're leaving a lot of threads dangling that we will work to tie up on Thursday. Corey and Anjali, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. So let's go through a couple of high-level updates that I know Anjali has from DOE. And then, as Anna mentioned, there are a lot of questions, so I don't know if we're going to have much time to get to any of them, but did want to start with some updates. So, Anjali, I'm going to start with the best update. So can you give an update on the school food issue? I think as folks may recall, there was an issue brought up several weeks ago about charters who are either starting or wanting to switch to DOE school food for next school year, what that process would entail, if they would be able to, how much money it would cost. So Erin, I see you're ready.
Yes, I am being the pitch hitter
Great.
This afternoon.
Go for it.
So very exciting update on the school food issue. It is turning out that we are going to be able to welcome charters that have applied to participate in our program for the first time this year. And so we are reaching out to those charters directly to talk more about next steps and some additional information. Very exciting. So if you are in that boat where previously you were not participating in our program, but you have already reached out, you had already started the process or have questions about that, please definitely reach out so that we can work with you directly about your particular situation.
Great. Okay. Good news. Thanks, Erin, and thanks, DOE. I know the team there the charter school office team worked very hard on that. So on the behalf of the, 20 or so schools that this was really impacting, thank you very much. Next up is the reconciliation period. I know has been delayed, and I was just, if you could provide any updates for New York City charters on that.
No updates as yet. We are still working to get the specific guidance that we are looking for from the state. So we will be in touch more as we are able to open up that window.
Okay, and just to be clear, once that window opens, schools will get more time added on at the end to complete reconciliation?
I believe that is what the conversation was, is that once the window opens, schools will have 30 days to complete the process, but I think that we will confirm that as we get a hold of the guidance and understand the timelines. But yes, that is where the conversation was the last time we visited that.
Cool.
And we hope to be able to send out that guidance tomorrow, and our as I conveyed to the New York City DOE, we understand the predicament that they're in.
Thank you, David.
So with all the vagueness, what we hope this will mean, I can say, though I know DOE and SED cannot, we're hoping this will just be a continuation of what we've been saying all along, is that charters are being held harmless for the period from March 17th through the end of the year. And so that should not impact many of you. Not to say I don't want to say no one has to do reconciliation, but just so that is clear on what schools are going to be looking for. Erin, can you just speak briefly about any trainings or office hours that you'll hold on the reconciliation? Because I know every school will need to add in something new, even if they're, as I said, there was the hold harmless that we are understanding is going to be coming through.
Yes, I believe we are planning to hold 2 office hours. Dates TBD once we announce the final deadline or the opening and closing dates for the reconciliation window. So we are planning to hold 2 trainings, and we'll be sharing those dates out so that, because we know folks are going to have questions about how to handle the remote learning period during reconciliation, and just make sure in general that your normal reconciliation questions are being addressed as well. So we are planning to do that. Dates TBD as soon as we confirm the overall window.
Great. Also last week, schools that are in co-located space received updated allocations for their school in terms of how many students at capacity, and also room specific capacity allocations. Could you just, I know you answered it in a Q&A to someone, but could you just say it out loud in case folks didn't read the answer about what that allocation was based on?
Sure. So, and let me pull up my notes. Yes, so the schools in DOE space received a range of capacity estimates for each classroom. The minimum number of people allowed in the room was based on calculating the square footage, dividing by 60 and rounding down to the lower whole number. And then the higher range is calculated by taking your square footage and dividing by 50 and rounding up to the next whole number. And essentially it winds up being the difference between, is your 6 feet of distance around each student a square, or is it a circle? And so it's just a different way of looking at each room. But at the end of the day, each school is going to have to look at each classroom to determine what is the right number of students that can fit in that space while observing 6 feet of social distance at each moment in time. So really these ranges are to be used for planning purposes, and definitely take a look at each room to see what makes sense in that context.
Great, and I'll just take this time. I think Erin hit the nail on the head when she mentioned the 6 feet. I think that is something that, you know, schools should really focus on when they are planning out their rooms. That was in the State Department of Health guidance that came out yesterday about having 6 feet. So I think schools are looking at their allocations and having questions, or thinking they could add a few students or something. You know, if you are able to map out that 6 square feet between desks or tables or however you're doing it, you should plan accordingly. I will tell you, I spoke earlier this afternoon with Anjali specifically about the new Department of Health guidance. I know there are a lot of questions. I already received some from many of you. I'm sure there are some in the chat. We will be holding a session at some point. I know that we held one a few weeks ago with the Department of Health in New York City. We will be holding a similar session because some of these questions are going to be very specific to what New York City is doing. And how the State Department, Health State Department guidance, how that is going to be interpreted, and questions you may have for New York City, because some of the implications, as I'm sure you saw, was that the city had to come up with some of the planning. So I just wanted everyone to know that this is all coming. Erin, would you speak briefly, because one of the things in the guidance last
I would just add there will be a lot more of that information in SED's guidance that comes out tomorrow. So I know the governor's guidance was a little vague about that, but we're going to really expand upon it.
In terms of requirements for health?
The distance, the space.
Got it. Okay.
6 feet, yeah.
We will look for that then too. In terms of the going back to the co-location, though, I think schools are anxious to work with their building councils, particularly around what to do with common shared space, such as gyms, auditoriums, cafeterias. I know DOE is working on guidance. Do you have any update on when that will be made available to schools?
No update. We are actively working on it, and we anticipate releasing it in the next couple of weeks. I believe if you have not already started reaching out to your building councils, catching up after being out of the building for a long time, we're definitely encouraging folks to start having those conversations now in advance of getting this guidance. What are your concerns? What are the challenges that you're seeing as you're looking at your capacity numbers? So have those conversations now, so that as you're getting additional guidance, including these checklists and pieces of guidance and strategies for the shared space. And when we're talking about shared space, I really want folks to acknowledge that if you've had a gym that you've used for the past 5 years, that gym may be up for grabs. If it's going to mean that students in another building that may be the difference between them being in the building 2 days a week versus 1 day a week. So I really want us to be open-minded as we're thinking about shared space and using those spaces, that that while not part of our allocated footprint, we may be used to thinking of as our space. So coming into those building council meetings and being really prepared to be reflecting on guidance as it comes, including this shared space guidance.
Okay. And then lastly, I know that email also mentioned that there were going to be weekly office hours with the Division of Facilities from Wednesdays, I believe, at 11. Is that going to be happening tomorrow, or is that to start up next week, Erin?
So I believe the plan is that it's going to start tomorrow. We are working on getting the link to share that out. So once we confirm the details, we will be sharing out the link in advance of tomorrow. So if you get to see weekly, look for the link coming today or early tomorrow morning.
Got it. So office hours are on for tomorrow. So schools, you should look for that. I want to make sure everyone gets in. And with that, I just want to end, you know, there are lots of programs. We'll be on the call on Thursday to make sure we can answer more questions. There are lots I'm sure that we did not get to. I didn't even read them all. But I do want to say, you know, the Charter Center is working on 2 programs right now. One I'm going to have Randall, he's going to post in the link, is Be in the Know series on Thursday, which is going to talk about how schools are dealing with capacity issues. And so this is going to be in direct response to not only the Department of Health guidelines, but also what SED puts out tomorrow in terms of how your capacity plans for students being in your building, what you're planning for, how you're planning for spaces to isolate, how you're planning for spaces to do temperature checks, all of that to share. So please join. And then next week, in response to many questions, and I think I saw a couple questions even on here, about how to make determinations about staff and reasonable accommodations under the Americans with Disability Law, Rehabilitation Act. A lot of you in New York City work with the firm Barton Gilman. They're going to be doing a session with the center to hopefully answer and go over a lot of those questions. So look for invites on both those Be in the Knows, but did just want to announce that those are coming. And it is exactly 5, so I will turn it back to you, Mika.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Please come back Thursday at 4 p.m. for our webinar where we follow up on this one. I see New York City Charter has a webinar or an event at 3 p.m. to talk, as a note in the chat. Check that out for school capacity and in-school attendance plans or in-person attendance plans. There's a lot of information out there. We will continue to provide more information. Tomorrow, look for SED's guidance to come out. In the interim, please, between now and Thursday, send us any questions you have. Feel free to email me your questions. We will get to them. We will make that our mission to do that. We hope to have also, hopefully, fingers crossed, DOH on the call on Thursday too, which I think David especially would appreciate. At any rate, thank you, everyone. We will see you Thursday. Bye-bye.
Everyone.